Well, the Fed came out and has paused interest rates. Some of you may have been surprised by that. Some of you thought he'd have gone down. And some of you just don't care. But to those of you still invested in the paradigm, we are going to look at Jerome Powell.
We understand the hardship that high inflation is causing, and we remain strongly committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal. Price stability is the responsibility of the Federal Reserve. Without price stability, the economy doesn't work for anyone. In particular,
all right, this I'm already finding just odd. He has played with pencils or pens, whatever it was that he was rolling around last time. He's played with a little piece of paper before, but this time he's bouncing around.
Our 2% goal. Price stability is the responsibility of the Federal.
He's got that deep breath that comes through. His little arm is flapping around. He's flipping the paper around.
Reserve. Without price stability, the economy doesn't work for anyone.
He's got the believe me look plastered to his face. And this is a guy who's used just to reading his little narrative that's been printed out for him.
I'm curious what gives you and the committee the confidence that waiting will not be counterproductive at a time when the monthly pace of core inflation is still so elevated. Interest rate sensitive sectors like housing, while they felt the drag of the past Fed actions, have started to recover in some regions, and financial conditions, most recently were easing.
So, I guess I would go back to the beginning of this tightening cycle to address that. So, as we started our rate hikes early last year, we said there were three issues that would need to be addressed kind of in sequence, and that of the speed of tightening, the level to which rates would need to go, and then the period of time over which we'd need to keep policy restrictive. So at the outset, going back 15 months, the key issue was how fast to move rates up, and we moved very quickly by historical standards. Then last December, after 4 consecutive 75 basis point hikes, we moderated to a pace of a 50 basis point hike, and then this year to 3 25 basis point hikes at sequential meetings. So it seemed to us to make obvious sense to moderate our rate hikes as we got closer to our destination. So the decision to...
I was letting him read this answer out because I wanted to make sure he was reading it out. I was like, oh man, it's not impossible to read, but it is very annoying when you have a prepared question and then a prepared answer that you wrote down. So as he answers it with his little hand in a fist walking around, he's just in portrayal. He's still nervous, still has a believe me look. Nothing really changed. I'm going to look and sit there and see if we've got somebody who throws him a curveball and he doesn't have a written down prepared answer. Oh, it's getting deep when they've started to actually really write down verbatim the answer.
Initial debate about the possibility of July, any sense of the initial support at this stage for that move?
So again, we didn't make a decision about July. I mean, of course, it came up in the meeting from time to time, but really the focus was on what to do today. I would say about July, two things. One, decision hasn't been made. Two.
All right, so as he's speaking about the July, the decision hasn't been made. And I don't see deception on that part. His body is moving with him, but there's a stutter, and it's followed with the hand coming up in a stop moment. So it means indecision in and of itself. There's an indecision. What it's hinging on, I don't know from their perspective.
I was just wondering if you could help us understand the narrative here, because it feels like there's been a level shift in the dots. Stronger GDP, less of a hit to unemployment, slower progress on inflation. And I'm wondering, in this, sort of, where's the disinflation coming from?
Sure.
The labor market's going to be stronger, it looks like. It's not coming from there. Demand's not coming down all that fast, according to GDP. You've doubled your estimate of GDP. So what's the narrative here? It seems like it's getting more immaculate rather than more messy.
So you're right that the data came in, I would say, consistent with, but on the high side of expectations. So, and if you go back to the former SEP, the last SEP in March, you will see that growth moved up. These are not huge moves, but growth estimates, think about it. And, I don't think the story has really changed. The committee has consistently said and believed that the process of getting inflation down is going to be a gradual one. It's going to take some time. And
then as he's talking about this part, getting inflation down, that kind of rhetoric, he's bouncing. He is stressed. I've never seen them this bad. And it's almost as far as, somebody who reads body language so that you understand the amount of bouncing that I'm picking up. You know how little kids, they bounce all the time on the floor? They're just bouncing. And of course, you as the adult who's around them all the time, it's below the radar. You don't really see it anymore. Yeah, they're bouncing. That's what they do. They run all over the house. They get into everything. Your mind has become accustomed to that amount of bouncing. Now, all of a sudden, it's like somebody has put them in some flubber. I reference Robin Williams' movie. And these kids are all over the place. You definitely see it. The regular bounce all of a sudden becomes a psychotic one that goes through the roof. The wiggling jitters the whole house like it's an earthquake. That is what I'm seeing. It has intensified. It's always been there, but now it's on steroids.
I think you go back to the three-part framework for core PCE inflation, which is, we think, as good an indicator as you can have for.
And the hand that keeps bouncing up and down as it's trying to pass over, I don't know if it's happened yet, but this is the kind of movement that I would expect to eventually hear about in the news, that the Fed has called an emergency meeting with the White House soon. I don't know. Maybe that's why Blinken is going to Xi Jinping. Maybe that's why China keeps telling him to pound sand. I don't know.
You said in the past that you don't like to surprise markets. It's kind of been the Fed's view. Markets should have an idea of what you're going to do before you go in. You also said a number of times that it would take a while to bring inflation down. You reiterated that again today, and that we would get to a point where inflation could be sticky. So I'm wondering, as we go into the next meetings, how Wall Street or others should look at your reaction function. What will you be reacting to, time or data? In other words, if nothing much changes, if we're looking at the same sort of labor market, the same sort of inflation levels in July or in September or November, will you move because you've said you feel you need to? Is it time that's going to require additional movement, or would it be a reversal in inflation?
All right, you see how he's looking down and he's looking around, but it's more like his head is moving with his eyeballs, so he's doing a brain search. He doesn't actually really know because he keeps mentioning both in the question, and he keeps going back and forth in his searching of his brain. He doesn't really know which one will be the dictator, nor does he know how to answer this question. It would make me believe that neither one of those is what he's actually looking for to be the indicator of his decision or their decision.
So I don't want to deal with hypotheticals about different ways data might move out. So we of course we don't go out of our way to surprise markets or the public. At the same time, our main focus has to be on getting the policy right, and that's what we're doing here, and that's what we'll do for the upcoming meetings. I will say the July meeting will be live, and we'll just have to see. I think you'll see the data, you'll hear Fed people talking about it, and markets will have to make a judgment.
Well, do you think inflation is likely to continue coming down based on the lags and based on your threat of additional movement, or are we going to be in a period where we're not going to know what's happening?
I think if you look at if you just look at, I'll just point you to the forecast. So inflation is running, core PCE inflation is running at about 4.5%, a little higher than 4.5%, and the median FOMC participant thinks it'll go down to 3.9 on a 12-month basis. This is by the end of this year. So that's expecting pretty substantial progress. That's a pretty significant decline for half a year. So that's the forecast. We do try to be transparent in our reaction function. We're committed to getting inflation down. And that's the number one thing. So that's how I think about it.
Let's go to Victoria.
Victoria Guido with Politico. Could you talk about the balance sheet and how you're thinking about it? What are you looking for to judge whether we're approaching reserve scarcity, and is Treasury issuance going to affect that? Also, are you considering lowering the RRP rate in order to take some pressure off banks?
So let me say, first of all, on the Treasury part of it, if I can talk about that, and then go back to the balance sheet. So on that, of course, we've been very focused on that for a couple of months, as everyone has. Treasury has laid out its borrowing plans publicly. I think I saw the Secretary's comments yesterday to the effect that Treasury has consulted widely with market participants about how to avoid market disruption, and that they're going to watch carefully for that. So that's from the Treasury, which actually sets the borrowings.
So is he speaking about this part? He's anchored himself on the podium. His bouncing around is less.
So I want to go back to comments you made about in the past about unsustainable fiscal path. The CBO projects the federal deficit to be 2.8 trillion in 10 years. The CBO also says that federal debt will be 52 trillion by 2033. At what point do you talk more firmly with lawmakers about fiscal responsibility? Because I'm assuming monetary policy cannot handle alone.
So he's anchored himself. We see the mouth movement. So this is increased stress.
The inflation, or keep that inflation in check with the higher level spending.
I don't do that. That's really not my job. We hope and expect that other policymakers will respect our independence on monetary policy, and we don't see ourselves as the judges of appropriate fiscal policy. I will say, and many of my predecessors have said, that we are on an unsustainable fiscal path, and that needs to be addressed over time. But I think trying to get into that with lawmakers would be kind of inappropriate, given our independence and our need to stick to our knitting.
Is there any conversation then about the Federal Reserve financing some of that debt that we're seeing coming down the pike?
No, under no circumstances.
No, under no circumstances. And there's no extra stress to that. He's still anchored on it. So he's firm in this. No, under no circumstances. He didn't try and get away from it. It doesn't scare him. He didn't go tight-lipped on it. It's just a firm no. Which for me, looking at it from the outside, I'm going, I wonder what happens when they don't get anybody to buy their bonds anymore.
If you like it, please share and subscribe. Thanks for watching.